Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. And my name is Eric Hui, and I'm from a company called Equinix. Equinix is a data center company. In Chinese, it's 数据中心. So we are actually the world's largest as far as footprint, and we have actually 100 data centers across the world. Now today, I'm very delighted to share some of the thoughts about data centers and cloud computing, especially in the Asian region and in Hong Kong. Why are data centers important? Data centers itself is actually going to be the future because it views a lot of the way that you use computers, a lot of the things that you do with your handphones right now. So when you look at that, data centers itself, the increasing focus in Asia region is actually tremendous. Why is that the case? There's a lot of crave in information technology right now, especially in Hong Kong. I would bet that in most of the population in Hong Kong, they don't have, each of the people there just don't have one cell phone. Probably one cell phone and one tablet. Very similar here in the US. And maybe even one more, especially with the children. Their parents are not seeing that they have an extra piece of device that they can serve some stuff that the parents don't want to see. So the crave of information technology is increasingly important. So that's the reason it's fueling a lot of the data center requirements in Asia and also in Hong Kong. Now the other thing is about protecting information. Now a lot of the companies out there, especially if you're an enterprise, you may be putting your own infrastructure in your own basement because you think that you have control. But a similar analogy is, are you putting all your cash under your bed? Why are you putting it in a bank? The reason is the bank is giving you a lot of security features that your home will not be able to support. You will not be able to spend that money on. Data centers itself is actually professionally managed and is professionally protected. That's the reason a lot of the enterprises and service providers are looking into data centers to help them deliver quality and protected services. Now the other thing is about rising cost in running data centers. I used the example before, was there are enterprises out there putting their data centers below in their basement. But in the case of Hong Kong, and actually a lot of cases in Asia as well, real estate prices are going up. That means your cost of running a data center, at least the footprint itself, is rising. So if that's the case, in the case of Hong Kong, where most people heard about Central, Zhongwan, there are some banks putting data centers in Zhongwan. It's actually very, very expensive. They cannot afford that anymore. So that's the reason they have to think about other ways of outsourcing that data center to different locations and to professional providers. Now the other thing is, of course, about cloud computing. Now cloud computing in mainland is called 云计算. So this cloud computing paradigm is something called a new paradigm of consuming IT. Whenever you want to buy a new computer, you have to go to a store and buy it. But now, with cloud computing, you can rent it as a service. So you don't need to buy that piece of computer or equipment up front. That is one of the paradigms that's fueling a lot of the growth in data centers. Because a lot of the compute power is now happening in a data center, not in your phone, not in your PC. It's relying on networks to make it work. So these are the few reasons why data centers is increasingly important and increasingly being a focus in Hong Kong, in Asia, and also here in, of course, the Valley. Now this is a research that's being done by Equinix as a data center provider, along with Forrester Research, looking at what are the things and the investments happening in data centers across Asia Pacific. If you look at the upper left-hand corner, it's showing that the most bullish of data center investments is actually in China and Hong Kong. Why are they doing that? The reason is because they're looking at disaster recovery and business continuity. What that means is, if you want to have a server happening somewhere, but if something happens, like there's no power, or maybe there's floods, or maybe there's a natural disaster, you want to make sure that there is a backup somewhere that it will continue to operate when the disaster happens. That's one of the reasons where in China and in Hong Kong, a lot of the companies and enterprise users and also service providers are looking into data centers in Hong Kong and across the region. Now, talking about data centers in Hong Kong, it's actually quite vibrant right now. About 2 years back, the Hong Kong government has actually carved a special piece of land called TKO. In Cantonese, it's Jiangguanmo. In Mandarin, it's Jiangjinan. That area is specially for data center providers. And you can see it's actually close to the eastern side of Kowloon. Whereas before, most of the data centers are happening in the other parts of Hong Kong, like in Tsuen Wan and also in Sha Tin area. So why is the government doing that? Why is the government carving a piece of land to support data centers? It's because they want to aspire to make Hong Kong one of the hubs for cloud computing. And there's a tremendous piece of initiatives. And also by the latest thing that happened in Hong Kong is by setting up this technology bureau, which just happened about a few weeks back, that we will have a very much focused effort in delivering and supporting service providers from the other side of the world, like here in the Valley, to go over to Hong Kong and set up base and shops to serve the local economy. Not just local, it can also be in China and also parts of Asia Pac. Now, if you look at our service provider, if you're looking for an opportunity right now, if you're living here, then you should be looking at some of those key technology drivers in Hong Kong. What are some of the factors that makes it appealing, that makes it attractive for you to look and actually go to Hong Kong and start something? By the way, Equinix is an American company. We are based here in Redwood City, down in the peninsula area. We actually started about 10 years ago, went to Hong Kong, and Hong Kong is actually our Asia Pacific base. So we started a journey 10 years back to invest in Hong Kong and spread the business within Asia Pac. So at that time, the factors are different, but right now, that some of these factors shown here is because of the exponential data growth in Asia, especially in Hong Kong, when I mentioned about there's a lot of mobile devices out there in Hong Kong. Now, also, it's a regional hub for China. It's also for Guangdong as well. There's a lot of the companies which they would aspire to go to South China in Guangdong actually use Hong Kong as the springboard to get started, to learn about the environment before they can make the step over to Guangdong. So that's the reason the connection between the Pearl River Delta, Hong Kong and Macau is so close, because we're interdependent on each other, especially for foreign enterprises. Now, that's the other thing we talked about is cloud computing. Hong Kong itself, actually, there's a lot of users of cloud computing. Okay, I can name a few. For example, MTR, the subway system in Hong Kong. They actually are one of the utility companies that have been very, very upfront and forefront in delivering cloud-based services for operational reasons and also serving customers. The other example is actually TVB, the television provider in Hong Kong. They are also active users of cloud computing. So if you are a service provider here in the Valley, if you're aspiring to test new markets and to test your new technologies, Hong Kong has a lot of base and a lot of users familiar and know about this technology that you can try and address. Now, the other thing is about outsourcing trend. There's a lot of enterprises in Hong Kong that actually rely on outsourcing to make it the transition to new technology usage. Outsourcing itself is a big industry in Hong Kong. So if you are a managed service provider here in the Valley, you actually be tempted to go explore what is the opportunity for you in Hong Kong and also in the PRD, the Pearl River Delta. I talked about that there's a lot of mobile usage in Hong Kong. Here are just some of the numbers that prove it. Mobile penetration is extremely high. The year-to-year growth is actually very, very high compared to the other Asian economies. And also, I must say, application development is very vibrant in Hong Kong. Especially if you're a SaaS provider, software as a service provider, it's very, very vibrant. We have seen acquisitions coming from mainland China capital to invest in Hong Kong-based software companies. I've seen a couple of them, actually some of my friends are part of that, and they're actually enjoying a lot of growth because of the whole pool of cloud and mobile in Hong Kong. about Hong Kong, you cannot forget about China. Okay? This is actually a chart that talks about the whole China growth and cloud computing in general. Currently, cloud computing in China is mostly fueled by mobile users. So most of the users of China Mobile, they are enjoying a lot of the cloud computing base that's being served, and mostly is served domestically. However, China enterprises are not that forefront, are not that moving fast in adopting cloud computing, partly because there are some of the regulations not very clear or not very clear-cut yet for a lot of the companies to take cloud computing from an enterprise point of view. However, the potential is enormous. It's just a matter of time, and it's a much matter of industry collaboration that will help China to move forefront to move the cloud computing paradigm much faster. In one of the charts shown in the middle lower left-hand corner, cloud itself, in a lot of the CIOs in China, is actually the #1 thing that they're considering. How are they going to use cloud technologies to make them be a little bit more upfront, and be able to serve the customers better? There's a lot of the Chinese enterprises actually going outbound. That means going outside of China. For example, Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. Alibaba already is a very, very clear example that the China companies are actually coming out to go serve the world. So they are also learning a lot what can be served, how it can be served, so that that technology itself is going to go enable the internal consumption within China. Now, I talked before that Equinix is a data center provider. Okay? We have a very, very broad footprint. What we do is we actually acquire land and we build professional data centers. We started as a company before was networks peering with each other. What does that mean? I'll give an example. Here in the Bay Area, if you go to the web, if you go to a website, if you want to click something which is actually stored in Hong Kong, say for example, you want to watch the Hong Kong news, okay? So the carrier traffic here in America is AT&T. AT&T receives an instruction that I want to go to Hong Kong TVB. So the traffic starts to AT&T, go over Pacific, and get to Hong Kong. But however, once it gets on to Hong Kong, AT&T does not have any more service. It has to rely on someone else to take your request to the TVB server in Hong Kong. So in Hong Kong, there are 3-4 providers. One of them is PCCW, the other is Hutchinson, right? And then Wharf T&T. So there are a few of the providers there. So what happened was AT&T and PCCW, they actually handshake their traffic in our data centers. Okay? So that's the reason what's called peering. That's the reason why data centers are important, is because networks and networks shake their hands in our data center. Okay? So that's how we started as a company. That's the reason data centers are important, especially when we call ourselves carrier neutral. We have all the carriers in our data center. So you can choose AT&T or you can choose T-Mobile, doesn't matter. You can choose Verizon, doesn't matter. Okay? But when it gets to the Pacific side, to Hong Kong, we will take care of your traffic to connect it to the local provider. That's how it works. So you can see what we are helping Hong Kong right now is we're helping a lot of the companies here in the Bay Area. If they have aspirations to go to Hong Kong, they can probably take their infrastructure here and take it over to Hong Kong and be connected together. That's how it works. So we have actually more than 1,000 networks within our data centers. It's quite a lot. It's a lot. If you look at the whole world footprint, it has 1,000 networks. It's quite a bit. And you can see the footprint that we have. In the right-hand side is the Asia-Pacific footprint that we have. We are based in Hong Kong. It's our Asia-Pacific headquarters. And 10 years ago, when we started that, we also have witnessed a lot of growth happening in our data centers, and we expanded from Hong Kong to Singapore, to Sydney, to Tokyo, Osaka, and also to Shanghai. So you can see, and I hope that inspires you, is using Hong Kong as the springboard to help you explore and expand to other locations within Asia-Pac. That's the advantage of what we can see, especially looking at Hong Kong as one of the gateways of doing so. Now, talking about the customer base in Hong Kong, who is using data centers in Hong Kong? So here's some of the descriptions shown in here. Hong Kong itself, definitely a lot of financial service companies. And it's not just only banks. It's also insurance companies. There's a lot of the brokerage, the stock brokerages in there that's also using data centers. Why? It's because when they want to do a trade, a capital market trade, because the capital market is also with the data centers, they do split-second trades within a data center. They don't need to go to the internet. It's a private connection within the data center. So that's the reason the financial services guys also see us as a very important piece of the ecosystem to serve customers in Hong Kong. The other thing that I was talking about earlier was the cloud computing piece. It's a potential Asia hub. We have seen a lot of movement of providers coming into Hong Kong. For example, Microsoft Azure is in Hong Kong. Google platform is also in Hong Kong. That's also with us. So that itself is becoming a very strong, attractive factor for a lot of the software companies here in the Valley to go to Hong Kong because the infrastructure is there. So that's a very, very important and attractive point. Now the other one is actually the content and digital media providers. For example, there is Akamai, there's Tencent, and these kind of companies are also using data centers to help them distribute traffic, from one location to another location, and also by caching some of the data in the periphery. So that itself is actually another reason why Hong Kong is so attractive. By the way, there was mentioned before that there's two government-supported bodies. One is Cyberport, the other is called Science Park. Cyberport is actually in the Hong Kong Island side. There is something that they call the Digital Cinema Exchange, which the Cyberport folks are basically helping a lot of the traffic, a lot of the encoding of a lot of the films and cinemas developed in Hong Kong to basically put them into the cloud and make them cloud ready. So there's a very interesting thing happening in Hong Kong to help to build a lot of the awareness and the adoption of cloud computing. And of course, networks itself is basically one of the key ingredients of data centers. Data centers sitting by themselves doesn't work. It's just like an island of nowhere. It has to be connected to a lot of other islands to make it a viable piece of asset. So that's the reason networks are important in the whole customer mix in Hong Kong. So these are the four things that we see a lot, and there will be increasingly more and more investments of customers going to Hong Kong to serve the local and the regional market. So as said before, here in the Valley, there's a lot of customers, a lot of cloud providers and service providers looking at ways to go to Asia to expand their footprint. I said before, Equinix actually is a beneficiary of that. We started 10 years ago going into Hong Kong, and now we're able to serve about approximately 20% of our revenues in the Asia Pacific region. It's because we invested 10 years ago to go to Hong Kong. So you can see that some of the customers that we are already serving is actually quite some big names from the Valley here. So I hope that basically entices you to look into ways, and because it's also the perfect infrastructure that Hong Kong can support you to not only just operate in Hong Kong, but also be in close proximity to Macau, to Guangdong, to also serve those markets. So I hope that inspires you a little bit about cloud, inspires you a little bit about data centers, and inspires you to get your act together to move and get an operation in Hong Kong in the PRD. Guangdong is actually very attractive as well. So we see there's a lot of momentum going there, and a lot of interest in companies here in the Valley that I talked in the last couple of days as well. So thank you for your time. I hope it helps you a bit, and I hope it actually gives you a little bit of thought, and I'll be around for questions as well.